Our next segment focuses on something that will absolutely, I am sure, astonish you. A madrassah operating out of a Toronto public school has been found to be putting anti-Semitic material in its curriculum. I am joined now by Steve McDonald. He's with the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs in Toronto. And my opening question is, how surprising is it that this should have been discovered?
Well, if you're talking about the content itself versus the school board, I think, look, it's very difficult for the school board to police the 20,000 permits they give out for organizations to use their premises. But now that this has been raised, I do think it is incumbent on the school board to take appropriate action with this organization. If you're asking me about how common is this in madrassah teachings or in Canada's Islamic community, I'm no expert on Islam, but if you listen to those who are, including many brave Muslim voices like Tariq Fatah and Irshad Manji, this is apparently more common than I think Canadians would be comfortable with. And so, again, I bring this back to the school board. It's time for some appropriate action right now.
And first, let's have an example. The kind of stuff that was in the curriculum. A passage, for instance, ever since the Prophet's entry into Medina, the treacherous Jews had vehemently opposed him and his Islamic call. And then, well, what are you meant to do about this? Why should a Muslim be healthy and strong? Firstly, it is necessary to take care of the body because it is a gift from Allah. Nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. But then secondly, so that you may be physically ready for jihad whenever the time comes for it. And it's all fine and good for Islamic spokesmen to back and fill and say, oh, jihad is about internal struggle, and you've got to have powerful biceps for the internal struggle. But we all know what they mean when they say jihad, don't we?
Well, I also think there's a particularly disturbing passage you didn't mention, which says that treacherous Jews conspired to kill the Prophet Muhammad. Those are exact words. Those aren't my words. I think the idea that vicious conspiracy theories are being taught here in Canada is very disturbing to Canadians, and I think there's a deeper issue at play here. As Canadians, do we or do we not have core ideals that we think are unchanging and non-negotiable, such as, for example, religious tolerance and respect for other people? Because this is a litmus test for Canadian values, and the idea that religious strife and extremism is being imported into our country, I think would be quite a threat, not just to the Jewish community, but to all Canadians.
Yeah, now this school has now apologized. Sort of, we have no idea how those treacherous Jews got into our curriculum, and they have said what you would expect someone to say in this kind of situation. They've said that they we unreservedly apologize to the Jewish community for the unintentional offense that the item has caused. I'm not sure which item. Maybe it was the one where they lumped Jews in with Nazis. I know when I get hate mail from the tinfoil hat crowd, one of their classic tropes is to call them the Zion-Nazis. Because of the Holocaust, if you really want to go off the deep end, you call Jews Nazis. It's just nothing more offensive is available to you than to say that. But now they come out and say, oh, well, we had no idea. So we operated for 40 years. We've taught thousands of Muslims. And what was this doing in there? That's a little disingenuous, isn't it? I mean, they must have known what they were telling the students. That is sort of, when you're a teacher, don't you know that?
Well, I share some of your skepticism. I mean, this material was distributed online in English, which I think shows a blatant contempt for the sort of, like I said, the sort of values and the sort of way we operate in this country. I do think that there is an appropriate step that the Toronto District School Board can take in its investigation. We're encouraged that they are performing an investigation because, you know, taxpayers have a right to ensure that taxpayer-funded property is not used to disseminate this kind of hate.
Now, I'm going to make a controversial point here. I'm something of a free speech absolutist, and one of the main reasons why is that if people are thinking something and muttering it, I want to hear them say it out loud so we know what's going on. If this sort of thing is, if you forbid any kind of school teaching this, but it's still a dominant opinion within at least certain segments of the Muslim community, they're going to be saying it at the dinner table. We'll never find out about it. Isn't it actually a service to us and to liberal Muslims that this stuff was said in such a public way? And now we could say, hey, wait a minute, you're teaching your kids what?
Well, I sympathize with your worldview on this, John. I mean, this is why we raised this issue. We didn't raise it as a legal issue. We didn't raise it as a police issue. We raised it to bring this into the light of day so that the public could see. And as you can see from all of the media coverage of this, there is a strong, I think, appetite within certainly the city of Toronto to bring these issues out into the open and talk about them. And so I agree with you. I think that exposing this to public discourse and public discussion is the best way to handle this.
Yeah, and I think we need to do this because if you look at public discussion in the Middle East, the extent of anti-Semitism, the virulence, the openness, endorsing the protocols of the Elders of Zion, the blood libel, that Jews put the blood of Gentile children into Passover bread, it's not even regarded in many countries as controversial to talk like that. If large numbers of immigrants come here, some of them are bringing this message with them and teaching it to their children. And we need to know if we're really importing this on a significant scale, and we need to say, why would you want to bring this into your country?
Well, and again, I go back to my earlier comment. As Canadians, we do believe in core values, I believe anyways, and we think that when those values are tested, we have to stand by those values. And one of those values, without question, is the idea that we don't raise our kids to hate other people in this country. That's not how we operate. Whether you are born in Canada, whether you've been here for over 200 years like my family, or whether you got here yesterday, it doesn't matter. The same rules apply to all of us. I've personally been to many synagogues, or I should say a number of synagogues and a number of churches in different parts of this country. I've sat in on Jewish and Christian Bible studies. Never once have I seen a vile conspiracy theory, let alone a blood libel, taught in any of those settings.
Right, and I think it's very important that you raise this. We can't ignore it. We cannot pretend it is not happening. We have to confront it, because this, I am sure, is just the tip of the iceberg. So, Steve McDonald, with the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs in Toronto, thanks very much for coming on the program to talk about it.
Thanks for having me, John.